Okay, let's start by taking a look at the security policies I've defined on my firewall. And the first thing that you might notice under the application column is that I've defined application policies based on signatures that are either predefined by Palo Alto Networks or custom signatures that I've defined myself. In other words, I don't allow any traffic through my firewall based on port and protocol only. It has to match an application signature that's either predefined or I've custom defined on the firewall myself. One of the key concepts that we have in the Palo Alto Networks firewall is the concept of the unknown application in this case. So we've got unknown peer-to-peer, unknown TCP, and unknown UDP. So on my firewall, I actually deny unknown applications. There may be use cases where you might want to allow unknown applications, say developers, they're developing applications and you want to go ahead and allow them. You can apply stricter content inspection to unknown applications. But in my case, I'm actually going to deny all unknown TCP and UDP and peer-to-peer applications. So once I've implemented that, I got a complaint from one of my users who said that she could no longer use one of the applications that she was using. So what I did is I went over here to the Monitor tab and I took a look at the traffic from her workstation and I matched it against unknown TCP. And what I found was there's an application here, unknown TCP, and it was on port 9339. So I did a little investigation on that. It turns out that that application is HayPay. It's an Android application that she uses, and so what I need to do and what I'm going to demonstrate is how to generate a custom signature to allow HayPay so that I can maintain an application-centric security policy. So after discovering that I was blocking the HayPay application, I had a couple choices. I could continue to deny the application, or I could just set up a pure port rule to allow that, which kind of defeats the purpose of having a purely application-centric security policy. So I decided that I would write my own signature. The first step to writing your own signature is actually to do a packet capture. And with the firewall, I'm actually able to capture all the information I need through the packet capture here. So to do this, I set up a filter. So I manage my filters. And then I click on Add. And I added a new filter here. And you can see I used the destination port that I was seeing for this application that I was denying, port 9339. Once I do that, I set up the receive stage packet capture. I enabled that and turned it on. And then I received a file that I could now download and decode in any packet decoder. I happen to use Wireshark. We'll open that up next. So I've opened the receive packet capture that I downloaded from the firewall, and I opened it up in Wireshark, and I can begin decoding. As we can see, the first three packets that we're taking a look at here is the SYN, the SYNAC, three-way handshake, and essentially there's not much information here that we can use to identify the application. It's basically what any legacy firewall would use to identify the application, which is TCP ports. On the fourth packet, though, we see that it actually has some data, and in that data we have this selection here. So this is actually what I'm going to use to identify the application. So now that I've got the information I need to create a custom application within the firewall, I click on Applications here. I would click on Add to create a new application. I've already created the application, so we'll just dive into the application itself. I called it HayPay. On the Configuration tab, I give it a name, HayPay. And under the properties, this is an important step in creating the application because we do a lot of filters, application filters to define security policy. So in here I gave it a general internet, subcategory internet utility, risk rating 3, and then the technology is browser based. I could also give it some extended characteristics if I wanted to. I chose not to for this application. In the Advanced tab, I can select a port or a protocol. In this case, I wanted to tie this application to this port. So once I define the application, this is the default port it would use, and it won't be able to be used on any other port. I could leave this blank, and it could be used on any port, and I could change that. I could also change some values here, specifically to timeouts. So I could change the timeout values and the wait, half open wait times, this, that, and the other thing. Also some information around scanning the application. So the meat of this is done under the signatures. So at this point we'd click on Add to create a new signature. I've already done it, and I've called it HayPay. Mistyped that, but that's all right. So I click on that, and then I'm going to leave it as a transaction. That's the default, and I'm going to leave it at ordered condition match. I've only got one condition to match on this application, so it doesn't really matter. So click on Add a Condition, and at that point you would get this window, and I have selected the context as an unknown request TCP payload, and I've done it as a pattern match. So this is the hex value that we saw on the payload on the Wireshark capture. So I'm just adding that, and the /x at the beginning and the /x at the end just says for the match to be a literal match of the hex value. So I click on OK, and I click on OK, and now I have a new application defined within the firewall once I commit the configuration called Heyday, and now I can use that in my policy. Okay, now that I've defined the application on the firewall, I can actually use the application in my security policy. So I've created a new security policy here called Heyday, and under the applications, I've identified Heyday, SSL, and web browsing. Actually, this application, when it first starts, it uses a web browsing application to connect to the server, and then it shifts to SSL, and it uses SSL to authenticate the user, and then from there it shifts to the last application, Heyday, which we've defined, and now since we've used the allow condition, the user can now use the application, and I've maintained an application-centric policy. So if I go to the Monitor tab, I can see here that I've got a number of matches for the application Heyday, and the default port that we identified, and I can see the destination addresses that it's connecting to, the source address. If I had source user, I would have that as well. Another interesting bit of information from the logs is I can see how many bytes of data that the application has used at any given time. And then, since I've defined the application, I can also use it in my ACC. I can see the application in my Application Control Center. And as you can see, it's right here, Heyday. And I can see the number of sessions and the total byte count. It's also right here, Heyday, in the window here. So what I can do is I can promote this and filter on Heyday. So I get a lot of information. Once I've identified the application, I can do a lot more with my firewall than I could previously if it was just unknown TCP. So I can track the application by user, source destination addresses. I can also track the application and identify threat activity, blocked activity. So there's a lot of value to taking your application, your security profile from port-based to application-based, and then from unknown applications to known applications. And thank you for viewing my video.